So this week we're talking about adaptation. So environmental changes, which we are going through very rapidly, require adaptations, and in order to adapt to new conditions, species need to migrate to an area with a more favorable environment or they become extinct. Pretty challenging for plant material. So this is the pepper and salt moth. Sometimes you see this called peppered moth. They were camouflaged by this white lichen, and lichen is very sensitive to pollution. In Britain, after the start of the Industrial Revolution, the pepper and salt moth changed color. Blending into the lichen helped them be protected from birds. And once the lichen was gone, there was soot all over the plant material. And this is what they would look like in that upper portion. Okay, so there's the microevolution process and the macroevolution process. Microevolution includes gene mutations, individuals are selected, populations evolve. Macroevolution includes long-term, large-scale changes where new species are formed and other species are lost, and these examples include the origin of humans and then the extinction of the dinosaurs. So limits on adaptation through natural selection. They're limited by its gene pool and how fast it can produce. Humans have a relatively slow generation time, decades, and output, number of young versus some other species. So common myths about evolution through natural selection. It's about the most descendants. It's not that they develop certain traits because they need them. It's what survives the conditions. And the more descendants you have, the better chance you have for those to survive. And of course, there's no such thing as genetic perfection. Okay, and of course we know climate change is happening. And here's a picture of the Earth 18,000 years ago. And you can see the ice coverage. And then on the right, this is modern day in August, but very little ice remains. And there's a lot of organisms that rely on that ice. So species relocate to areas with more tolerable climate conditions, and range shifts particularly threaten species that can't move fast enough or depend on conditions that are becoming more rare, like sea ice. So here are examples of the USDA hardiness zone maps. One on the left is from 1990, the one on the right is 2006, and you can see the purple colors are the coldest areas, and those have moved north. And then the orange and the pink are the warmer climates, and those have moved up. And I'm sure it's changed even more so since 2006. So the recent past, 1960 to 1990, here's a distribution of the species that can be found on the east side of the country. And on the right, this is the projected species diversity 2070 to 2100. And you can see maple, beech, and birch are all but gone. The aspen and the birch gone. Much less diversity. We have a lot of diversity on the left-hand side. So generalist species tolerate a wide range of conditions, while specialist species can only tolerate a narrow range of conditions. So if the environment is constant, specialists don't have a lot of competition. And when they change rapidly, the generalists have the advantage. So one plant, this is Amelanchier alnifolia, which is one of our native plants in this area. They're very sensitive to competition. So if an invasive species comes along, they will not be able to compete with that species. So invasive species tolerate a variety of habitat conditions. They grow and reproduce rapidly. They compete aggressively for resources. Resources include food, water, and habitat. They lack natural enemies or predators in their new ecosystem. They have a low susceptibility to disease, and generalists can adapt to different conditions. And this is Lythrum salicaria, which is purple loosestrife, which is the epitome of the perfect competitive plant. One purple loosestrife plant can produce 2.7 million seeds per year with a 60 to 70% survival rate. It is listed on Washington State Noxious Weed Board's quarantine list. So it's primarily up along the northern portion of the country, and you can see that from the map on the left. And on the right, these are counties that have, if they're green, they do have it to some degree. The only counties that don't have infestations are white, and that's not very many in our state. We've had a lot of success with biological controls with this plant, though. It's definitely been able to be managed on some level with 3 different beetles that feed on it. Okay, one super generalist is Acer rubrum, or red maple. It's one of the most successful and abundant species in the eastern deciduous forest. It grows on the widest variety of sites and in the greatest range of conditions of any North American species. It can deal with sun or shade, high or low nutrients, dry or moist conditions. And you'll see this a lot in commercial plantings. We have quite a few on the campus. So limits to adaptation include the population's gene pool and its rate of reproduction. That can limit the population's ability to adapt to new environmental conditions. The only genetic traits that can adapt are those that are already in the gene pool. The population's reproductive capacity limits those genes that can adapt. Genetically diverse species that reproduce quickly can often adapt quickly. Populations that reproduce slowly take a long time to adapt through natural selection. So ecotypes are populations or subspecies that are adapted to local environmental conditions. Ecotypic variation, this is genetic variation found in a large continuous geographic population. So ecotypic traits include morphology, which is just the way plants look, and that's stature, leaf, floral traits, etc. And this is Geranium sanguineum in a common garden. You can see the traits in a dry open space. The leaves are quite a bit sparser, and on the right, moist shaded, plenty of surface area. So plants occupy the most suitable habitats within their range, those with environmental features and competitive dynamics for which they're best adapted. This is where we get into trouble with invasive species, because while these plants may the native species might be in the right conditions, invasive species can crowd them out pretty easily. So limiting factors to plant growth include temperature, the availability of water, sunlight, and then if one or more of these is low, growth is limited or actually halted. So resources include those above ground and below ground. Above ground include light, carbon dioxide, pollinators, dispersers. Below ground, water, oxygen, nutrients, mycorrhizae, which we'll talk about in a little while, and space. So creosote bush has an extensive rooting system. It can survive temperature fluctuations of almost 70 degrees Fahrenheit from day to night. It photosynthesizes in the mornings. It always faces southeast, and it sheds some lights that leaves in extreme drought and only flowers opportunistically. So if it takes a lot of energy to do so, the pollinators have to be in the area for them to actually flower. Jojoba can alter their leaf size and color. Pubescence is that gray color. and that depends on the season of growth. The leaf angle responds to diurnal changes in the sun angle. Tundra adaptations include things like small plants grow close to the ground for warmth. Dark colored flowers absorb heat from the sun, and fuzzy stems provide protection from wind. So some of the plant defenses you'll see are mechanical, chemical, biotic. Some plants have more than one type of plant defense, and often at different stages of their life. So some of the defenses include hairs on the leaf surfaces, spines, which are modified leaves, thorns that are modified shoots, and toughness. So hairiness can have multi-purposes. Not a lot of herbivores are going to want to feed on these leaves, but it also protects the plants from wind and drought. And of course, here's our Canada thistle, and these spines are pretty challenging to work with. Thorns can prevent chewing and climbing. And I'm going to continue on the next round for the chemical.